Welcome back to Sovereign Judgment, where suburban authority meets the kind of paperwork it really should have read before knocking on somebody's door. Today's story involves one denied deck permit, an HOA president with the tactical instincts of a decorative cabbage, and a Carnival swing ride licensed to carry 300 guests. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments, because I need to know how far the sound of Brenda Carlisle screaming traveled. All right, let's raise the safety bar. The first person to vomit on my front lawn was a 37-year-old accountant named Wesley Pike. To Wesley's credit, he made it almost 4 complete revolutions before losing a paper tray of powdered funnel cake over the side of Swinging Sovereign, the 68-foot Carnival ride, currently rotating above my property at 22 miles per hour. The powdered sugar drifted down over 118 Marigold Crest, like festive snow. The funnel cake followed with considerably less grace. Wesley's wife, Dana, waved from swing number 41, while shouting, "He told me he could handle spinning." Below her, Wesley leaned against my mailbox with the pale, betrayed expression of a man whose inner ear had just filed for divorce. I handed him a bottle of water. "First Carnival ride?" I asked. He nodded weakly. "First HOA election too?" He nodded again. Big afternoon. Across the street, former HOA president Brenda Carlisle stood beside her pearl-white golf cart, gripping a clipboard to her chest like it contained the launch codes. She wore a lemon-yellow pantsuit that made her look like a stick of butter running for public office. Her mouth opened every time the swings passed over my roof, but the music from the ride drowned her out. That was fortunate for everyone. The ride speakers were playing an instrumental version of "Walking on Sunshine," because Big Mike D'Angelo believed every public humiliation required a cheerful soundtrack. Mike stood at the control booth, shaped like a commercial refrigerator that had learned to operate hydraulic machinery. He wore orange safety glasses, a reflective vest, and the serene expression of a man who had passed 17 state inspections and feared only low-quality barbecue. He glanced at Brenda, glanced at me, and pressed the button that increased the ride's decorative lights. "Think she likes it?" he asked. "She's holding the clipboard sideways." That's a no then. 3 months earlier, I had only wanted a deck, not a nightclub, not an observation platform, not a pirate ship with cannons aimed at the community pool. A deck. 480 square feet of pressure-treated lumber behind my house, elevated 28 inches above grade, with a 12-foot pergola and enough room for 6 chairs, a grill, and my father's old rocking chair. The rocking chair was the important part. My father, Robert Mercer, had built it in 1987 from white oak he bought for $63.40 at a lumber yard that no longer existed. He had used that chair every evening after work until his knees stopped cooperating. When he died, I inherited the chair, his socket wrench collection, and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Dad." The house on Marigold Crest was supposed to be my fresh start after 10 years of repairing municipal bridges, parking structures, and public buildings across 3 fictional counties, with names that sounded like rejected breakfast cereals. I was a structural engineer, though I rarely announced it, because people either asked me to inspect cracks in their basement or began explaining why their homemade treehouse was basically to code. I bought the house because the backyard faced 12 acres of protected wetlands. At sunset, the reeds turned copper, tree frogs started screaming romantic invitations at one another, and a heron named Gary occasionally judged me from the drainage pond. The only thing missing was a place to sit. So I drew the deck plans myself, not on a napkin, not with crayons. I produced 27 pages of stamped structural drawings, load calculations, footing details, drainage specifications, railing sections, electrical notes, and a material schedule so precise it knew the number of galvanized washers before I did. The city of Bellwether approved the permit in 6 business days. The Briar Glen Homeowners Association denied it in 43 minutes. Their rejection arrived in a cream-colored envelope embossed with a gold acorn logo, because nothing says responsible fiscal management like luxury stationery used to prohibit outdoor furniture. The letter was dated April 3rd and signed by Brenda Carlisle, HOA President, Chair of the Architectural Harmony Committee, and apparently Empress of Horizontal Surfaces. It read, "Dear Mr. Mercer, Your proposed rear yard deck has been denied under Covenant 8.14, paragraph C, which prohibits exterior structures that may disrupt the visual continuity, aesthetic serenity, or established character of the Briar Glen community. Additionally, the committee has determined that elevated leisure platforms may encourage excessive outdoor congregation. I read that sentence 3 times. Elevated leisure platforms, I said aloud. My coffee had gone cold beside me, as it always did. I made coffee every morning and then abandoned it while doing something allegedly more urgent, like reading municipal ordinances or trying to identify which squirrel was stealing insulation from my shed. I took a sip anyway. It tasted like a threat issued by a puddle. The denial continued. You are instructed not to begin construction. Any violation will result in an initial fine of $250, followed by daily penalties of $75. For questions, please attend the next board meeting or contact President Carlisle during approved communication hours, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., 30 minutes twice a week. The Pope was easier to reach. Brenda arrived at my house the next morning at 8:12, which fell outside her own approved communication hours by almost 2 full days. Her golf cart rolled up my driveway with an amber light flashing on top, despite the fact that Briar Glen had no emergency services and a speed limit of 14 miles per hour. She parked sideways behind my truck. Then she climbed out. Brenda Carlisle was 58, wore her silver blonde hair in a shellacked dome, and dressed for minor neighborhood disputes as though they might end in a televised summit. That morning she had on a floral blazer that looked like a sofa had fought its way into middle management. Her white slacks were pressed so sharply they could have opened mail. Under one arm was the clipboard. Brenda always carried a clipboard. I eventually learned she owned 7 of them, each color-coded by category: architectural violations, landscaping violations, vehicle violations, holiday decoration violations, miscellaneous disobedience, pending disobedience, and people she disliked but had not yet assigned a regulation. She marched toward me while I was measuring the proposed deck footprint. Mr. Mercer. Her voice had the texture of a fork being pulled slowly across a ceramic casserole dish. Mrs. Carlisle. President Carlisle in official matters. Is this an official matter? She raised the clipboard like a judge displaying evidence in a courtroom sponsored by Pottery Barn. You received the committee's determination. I did, and yet I see measuring equipment. It's a tape measure. It indicates intent. It indicates 12 feet. Her smile tightened like a zip tie around a garden hose. The board has made its decision. Your deck would be visible from neighboring properties. So is my house. Don't be facetious. I'm asking how visibility is defined under Covenant 8.114. She flipped through her papers with the speed of someone trying to find a fact before confidence ran out. The covenant clearly protects aesthetic serenity. It doesn't define that either. The committee defines it. Where? The committee is not required to debate its interpretive authority on individual driveways. That's convenient. Her nostrils flared like 2 tiny curtains catching a draft. Mr. Mercer, this community has standards. Residents cannot simply build whatever they please. The city approved the deck. The city governs minimum legality. We govern harmony. I looked toward the Kaplan house 2 doors down, where an 8-foot inflatable Easter rabbit had collapsed face first into a hedge and was being rhythmically inflated by a struggling fan. Very harmonious, I said. Brenda followed my gaze. The Kaplans have until noon. Of course they do. She tapped the clipboard. I'm here to advise you that any materials delivered for unauthorized construction will constitute commencement. The first fine will be immediate. Can I appeal? You may submit Form AHC-19 with a $175 administrative review fee. Who reviews it? The Architectural Harmony Committee. Who chairs that? I do. So I can pay you $175 to ask you whether you agree with yourself. Her face took on the patient sorrow of a queen, disappointed by the literacy rate of her peasants. You may characterize it however you wish. I think I just did. She leaned closer. Her perfume arrived half a second before she did, smelling like lilacs trapped inside a copier. I strongly recommend that you let this go, Mr. Mercer. People who create conflict in Briar Glen often find that their other violations receive closer attention. There it was. Not quite a threat. More like a threat wearing sensible shoes and pretending to browse. I folded the tape measure. Is that official guidance? Her eyes flicked toward my phone, which was lying on the workbench recording our conversation in plain sight. I'm merely explaining community procedure. Good. I'd hate to misunderstand. She returned to the golf cart with the rigid posture of a general retreating from a battle she intended to describe as strategically successful. Before leaving, she photographed my tape measure. The escalation began 2 days later. At 6:34 a.m., I received a violation notice for unsecured construction-related equipment. The equipment was the tape measure. Fine, $250. At 11:18, I received another notice because my recycling bin remained visible 17 minutes after the permitted collection window. Fine, $75. On Friday, Brenda posted in the Briar Glen Community Facebook group that certain new residents were attempting to circumvent rules designed to preserve property values. She did not use my name. She did upload a photograph of my house with a red arrow pointing at it. Her caption included 3 American flag emojis, which seemed ambitious for a dispute involving patio furniture. By the end of the week, I had accumulated $625 in fines. One was for weeds taller than 4 inches. The weed in question was a single dandelion growing through a crack behind my air conditioning unit. Brenda photographed it beside a ruler, from 3 separate angles, like a crime scene technician documenting botanical homicide. Another fine cited my truck for being commercial in appearance. It was a gray Ford F-150 with 1 magnet on the door, displaying the name Mercer Structural Consulting. Apparently, commerce began at magnetism. I appealed each fine in writing. Brenda denied each appeal using nearly identical language, including the phrase, "The committee finds no basis to disturb its original finding." The committee consisted of Brenda, her friend Diane Pritchard, and a retired dentist named Harold Boone, who attended meetings through speakerphone and seemed unaware he was still a member. At the April board meeting, Harold's phone remained connected while he ordered soup at a restaurant. "Your architectural appeal is denied," Brenda announced from behind a folding table draped in burgundy cloth. Through the speakerphone, Harold said, "No onions, please." I stood before 27 residents in the Briar Glen clubhouse, a room decorated with artificial ivy and framed photographs of previous landscaping award winners. "Can I ask what part of the deck violates the covenants?" Brenda adjusted her HOA polo shirt. The embroidered acorn on her chest sat like a military decoration she had personally awarded herself for valor under sprinklers. "The deck conflicts with the established character of neighboring structures. There are 11 decks in Briar Glen. Those predate current interpretive standards. 3 were built last year." Diane Pritchard stared down at her papers with the intensity of someone hoping invisibility could be achieved administratively. Brenda continued, her voice rising like a smoke alarm discovering burnt toast. "The board is not required to justify every discretionary aesthetic determination." A man in the second row raised his hand. "Didn't you approve your own sunroom in January?" he asked. This was Lionel Brooks, a retired history teacher with eyebrows like 2 gray caterpillars attempting to leave his forehead. Brenda looked at him. "My sunroom is architecturally integrated." Lionel looked at me. "It's purple." "Mulberry," Brenda snapped. Harold's voice floated from the speakerphone. "Could I get crackers?" Brenda ended public comment 4 minutes early. The following Monday, she called the Bellwether Police Department and reported an active illegal construction site. Officer Samuel Ortiz arrived at 2:16 p.m. He was 40-something, slightly stooped, and carried the permanent expression of a man who had once responded to a dispute over a decorative gnome and never emotionally returned. I met him in the driveway. Brenda was already there beside her golf cart, clipboard ready. Officer Ortiz looked around. There were no workers, no lumber, no tools. The tape measure was inside my kitchen. "Where's the construction?" he asked. Brenda pointed toward 12 orange marking flags in the grass. "Those indicate excavation boundaries." "They indicate corners," I said. Officer Ortiz took a long breath through his nose. "Have you excavated anything?" "No." "Have you built anything?" "No." Brenda thrust a printed copy of Covenant 8.14 toward him. "He is preparing to commit an architectural violation." Ortiz looked at the covenant, then at her. That's not a police matter. It becomes a police matter when a resident refuses lawful authority. Are you law enforcement? I am the elected president of this association. That wasn't my question. Brenda straightened like a flamingo, trying to establish jurisdiction. Officer, I need this documented. He removed a small notebook. All right. At 2:16 p.m., I responded to 12 flags in a lawn. They are not merely flags. Ortiz closed the notebook. They are currently the most cooperative people here. He left after advising Brenda not to call emergency services for anticipated carpentry. His final words, delivered with the exhausted calm of a man placing the last sandbag against a flood of nonsense, were, "Nobody has committed a crime, and the grass appears to be handling the flags. Brenda sent me a $150 fine for creating a police disturbance. That was the closest I came to losing my temper." I stood in my kitchen holding the notice while my coffee cooled on the counter for the 8th consecutive morning. My father's rocking chair sat inside the sliding glass door, wedged between a bookshelf and a floor lamp, because there was nowhere else for it to go. I imagined him looking at the situation. He had been a quiet man who fixed small engines, distrusted neckties, and believed any problem could be improved by sharpening something. He would have told me not to yell. Then he would have spent 3 days reading every rule Brenda had ever written. So that's what I did. I requested the complete governing documents, meeting minutes, architectural records, insurance policies, enforcement logs, annual budgets, vendor contracts, election records, and every version of the architectural guidelines adopted since Briar Glen was established in 1998. Brenda responded that my request was overly burdensome. I sent her the state statute requiring production within 10 business days. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. 9 days later, 4 banker's boxes appeared on my porch. Inside were 6,218 pages of Briar Glen history. I scanned all of them. Then I built a spreadsheet. Most people use spreadsheets to manage budgets or track vacation days. I used them the way medieval kings used siege engines. By midnight, I had cataloged every approved structure in the neighborhood. Decks, 11. Gazebos, 6. Pergolas, 9. Detached sheds, 23. Brenda's architecturally integrated purple sunroom, 1. I also found something interesting in the original development plan. Briar Glen bordered a parcel called Lot 17B, zoned CRD, Commercial Recreation District. That parcel was not HOA property. It belonged to the city until 2009, when it had been sold to the owner of my house. Lot 17B was a narrow wedge running behind my backyard, 62 feet wide and 190 feet deep. I checked my deed. There it was. I owned it. The property line passed 17 feet behind the proposed deck location. Brenda had denied my deck because it sat on Lot 17A, the residential parcel governed by the HOA. Lot 17B was subject only to city and county regulations. More importantly, commercial recreation district zoning permitted temporary or seasonal amusement structures, fairground equipment, spectator attractions, and mechanically operated rides, provided the owner obtained a conditional event permit and passed state safety inspection. I stared at the ordinance. Then I stared at the rocking chair. Then I reheated my coffee, forgot about it, and let it go cold again, while I searched for Carnival ride operators. That was how I met Big Mike D'Angelo. D'Angelo Midway Attractions operated from a 20-acre equipment yard outside fictional Prosper County. When I arrived, Mike was standing beside a disassembled Ferris wheel, eating potato salad directly from the container with a plastic serving spoon. He was 6'4", broad enough to interfere with local weather patterns, and had a black mustache shaped like 2 paintbrushes, shaking hands beneath his nose. "You the deck guy?" he asked. "That depends who's asking." Mike D'Angelo, state-certified ride operator, mechanical inspector, owner of everything you see except that porta potty. Randy owns that. Don't ask why. I shook his hand. His grip felt like a hydraulic press, politely confirming my identity. I explained the zoning, the HOA denial, and the size of Lot 17B. Mike listened without interrupting, occasionally scooping potato salad into his mouth. When I finished, he wiped his mustache. "So she told you no deck because people might gather outside. Excessive outdoor congregation. And your commercial parcel allows amusement rides? With permits. How many people live in the HOA? 312 adults. Mike grinned. It was the grin of a man who had just discovered his favorite tool also came with fireworks. I've dealt with people like Brenda, he said. They confuse quiet neighborhoods with private kingdoms. Best thing you can do is let them write the invitation to their own parade. He led me between rows of ride trailers. We passed a tilt-a-whirl, a small roller coaster, 2 children's trains, and something called the centrifugal possum, which Mike admitted had performed poorly in family markets. At the far end of the yard stood Swinging Sovereign. It was a portable wave swinger with a 68-foot central tower, 75 double-seat chairs, programmable LED panels, a 24-speaker audio system, and a maximum capacity of 150 riders per cycle. With 2 cycles per hour during a 10-hour permitted event, it could legally host 300 guests with room to spare. The canopy was painted royal blue and gold. Around its edge were murals of clouds, eagles, and vaguely European castles that looked like they had been designed by someone who had heard about Europe through a cousin. Mike slapped the trailer frame. She's got a 300-guest event rating, certified last month. Needs 34 feet of radius, 4 outriggers, 3-phase power, and 1 person mature enough not to push the emergency stop because a bee flew near them. How much? For 1 weekend. Delivery, setup, inspections, crew, insurance, fencing, portable lighting, music licensing, and Randy's mysterious toilet? Yes. $18,400. I stared at him. He stared back. Deck would have been cheaper, he said. Much. You still want the deck? More than ever. Then we build the ride. I would have followed that man into battle, provided battle included fried dough and properly torqued anchor bolts. Before I signed anything, I made the plan bulletproof. The city planning director, Evelyn Cho, reviewed the parcel map and confirmed the HOA had no jurisdiction over Lot 17B. Evelyn was 5 feet 2, wore red glasses, and spoke with the brisk efficiency of someone who had denied more foolish projects before breakfast than most people encountered in a lifetime. She examined my application. You're proposing a temporary Carnival swing ride behind a residential property. Correct. Because your deck was denied? That is context, not engineering. Her mouth twitched. Maximum attendance? 300 guests. Invitation only. Parking. Off-site at Bellwether Community College with shuttle service. Noise? Within the commercial recreation limit. Music ends at 8 p.m. Sanitation? Randy. She looked up. Who is Randy? I'm still gathering information. She leaned back in her chair, looking like a librarian who had just discovered a legal loophole in the Dewey Decimal System. The parcel is correctly zoned. Your setbacks comply. The ride is temporary. The state inspector must certify installation. Fire access has to remain open. You'll need event insurance of at least $2 million. I have a $5 million policy quote. Evelyn stamped the application. Then, provided all inspections pass, this is completely legal. I paid $1,260 in permit fees. I hired 2 shuttle buses. I contracted a food vendor named Rosa Bellini, whose funnel cakes had won the fictional Tri-County Fair 3 years in a row, and whose right forearm was stronger than most residential deck beams. I rented crowd control fencing, portable lights, hand-washing stations, 8 picnic tables, and 12 trash receptacles. Randy included 3 toilets. No one explained ownership. I also created printed invitations for every household in Briar Glen. The card read, Briar Glen Community Appreciation Day, Saturday, May 24th, 12 p.m., 8 p.m. Free carnival rides, food, games, and neighborhood election information. Maximum attendance, 300 guests. Hosted by Daniel Mercer on privately owned commercial recreation parcel 17B. All permits approved. I sent one to Brenda by certified mail. She refused delivery. The first truck arrived on Thursday at 5:47 a.m. It was a red Peterbilt hauling the central tower of Swinging Sovereign. The second carried the canopy and chairs. The third carried generators, fencing, and the portable control booth. By 6:05, every curtain in Briar Glen was moving. Mike's crew worked with military precision. Outriggers unfolded. Steel plates settled onto engineered mats. The tower rose in sections, lifted by a crane that beeped every time it reversed with the relentless cheerfulness of a microwave that had developed authority. At 7:18, Brenda's golf cart appeared. The amber light was flashing. She drove directly into my yard and stopped 6 feet from a posted sign reading, "Authorized personnel only. Active commercial installation. Hard hats required." Brenda climbed out without a hard hat. She wore a turquoise tracksuit patterned with white hibiscus flowers, making her look like a tropical resort had been subpoenaed. The clipboard was tucked under her arm. "What is this?" she demanded. Mike looked down from the base assembly. "Looks like a W-72 portable wave swinger." "I'm not speaking to you." Mike glanced at me. "She's speaking in my direction." I walked over. "Good morning, Brenda. President Carlisle. You are in direct violation of the architectural denial issued April 3rd. This structure is not approved. It's not on HOA property." She blinked. The expression on her face was like watching a computer try to divide by scented candle. "What did you say?" "This is Lot 17B.
Commercial Recreation District."
She looked past me at the 68-foot tower section suspended from the crane.
"You cannot place Carnival equipment in Briar Glen."
"Correct. Briar Glen ends 17 feet that way." I pointed to a new survey monument and a bright yellow property line. Brenda marched toward it. She bent down, inspected the marker, and stood again with the stiff, offended movement of a person who had just discovered geography, could disagree with her. "This parcel is accessed through the community. My driveway provides lawful access under the recorded easement. Section 8.14 prohibits disruptive exterior structures on HOA-controlled residential lots. The board's authority extends to activities affecting community harmony. Not according to the declaration." She opened the clipboard. Pages fluttered beneath her fingers like pigeons escaping a handbag. "This is clearly an amusement park. Temporary community event. You expect me to believe 300 people will attend this. That's the permit capacity." Her mouth dropped open. 300? "Guests," Mike called down from the platform. "Could do 350 if we staggered them, but he said to keep it neighborly." Brenda's head snapped toward him like a lawn sprinkler reaching the end of its arc. "I will have this shut down." "You're welcome to call the city," I said. "The permit number is posted on the fence. I don't need your permission to contact municipal authorities." "That's fortunate." She drove away so quickly, the golf cart's amber light tilted backward. At 8:03, Planning Director Evelyn Cho arrived. At 8:21, the fire marshal arrived. At 8:44, the state ride inspector arrived. Brenda had called all three. Each inspected the site. Each signed off. The state inspector, Curtis Wynn, spent 41 minutes checking bolts, restraints, welds, electrical systems, and emergency controls. Curtis had a beard like a retired sea captain and moved around the machinery with the slow seriousness of a man who regarded torque specifications as sacred text. When he finished, he attached a bright green operating certificate to the control booth. Brenda stood outside the fence. "This cannot be approved," she said. Curtis adjusted his glasses. "Why not?" "It's incompatible with neighborhood character. I inspect whether rides detach unexpectedly. It disrupts visual continuity. Nothing has detached." She turned to Evelyn. "There must be an emergency zoning provision." Evelyn consulted her tablet. "There is. It applies to floods, structural failures, hazardous spills, and escaped livestock." "This is more disruptive than livestock." Curtis looked at the ride. "Depends on the livestock." The fire marshal approved the access lane. Evelyn signed the final event authorization. Brenda held up her clipboard. "I'm filing an immediate board injunction." "With whom?" I asked. "The board. You don't control this parcel. The board will decide that." "No," Evelyn said. "The county recorder already did." Brenda's face reddened in stages, like a tomato receiving difficult news. "This isn't over." Officer Samuel Ortiz arrived at 9:12 after Brenda reported an unlicensed mechanical tower threatening residents. He took one look at the green operating certificate, the event permit, the fire marshal's signature, and the professionally fenced installation. Then he looked at Brenda. "Is the tower threatening anyone verbally? This is not funny. I'm asking because mechanically it appears to be minding its business." She shoved her clipboard toward him. "The HOA has prohibited this installation." Evelyn handed him the parcel map. "The HOA has no authority over the commercial lot." Ortiz studied the map for 7 seconds. So the ride is legal? Yes, Evelyn said. The installation is certified. Yes, and nobody is under arrest. No. He returned the map. Brenda pointed at me. He has intentionally created a nuisance in retaliation for lawful enforcement. Ortiz looked at the silent, stationary ride. Right now, the nuisance is mostly paperwork. He left with his usual closing summary. The machine has a permit. The clipboard does not. Saturday arrived warm and cloudless. At 11:30, the shuttle buses began bringing residents from the college parking lot. By noon, 186 people had checked in. By 12:45, we reached 274. Children ran between carnival games. Rosa Bellini fried funnel cakes beneath a striped canopy. Lionel Brooks operated the ring toss and awarded full-sized candy bars because, in his words, I survived 40 years of standardized testing and refused to ration joy. My father's rocking chair sat on a temporary platform beside the wetlands, exactly where the deck would eventually go if sanity returned to Briar Glen. I sat in it for 10 minutes. The frogs were quiet beneath the carnival music. Gary the heron had relocated to the far side of the pond and looked deeply disappointed in municipal zoning. At 1:17, Brenda arrived. Not by shuttle. She drove the golf cart down my driveway and stopped at the event entrance, blocking a group of 12 guests. She wore a white sun visor, navy slacks, and a red polo shirt embroidered with the HOA acorn. She looked like a cruise director preparing to arrest the buffet. Diane Pritchard sat beside her, visibly regretting every decision that had led to this moment. Brenda stood and raised a battery-powered megaphone. This event is unauthorized by the Briar Glen Homeowners Association. The crowd turned. Mike lowered the music. I walked to the gate. You received the permit information, I said. I refuse to recognize permits obtained through deliberate deception. What deception? You described this as a community appreciation event. I gestured toward 300 neighbors eating funnel cake beneath a carnival ride. I appreciate them. A few people applauded. Brenda raised the megaphone again. Under Section 4.06, Paragraph D, residents must permit inspection of any activity reasonably suspected of violating association standards. As president, I am entering the site to document violations. This isn't association property. The activity affects association members. You're not authorized to enter the operational area. I have inspection authority. Not here. Her eyes narrowed. Are you denying me access? Yes. That was the moment she created her own trap. Brenda had spent 7 weeks insisting that association officials possessed unrestricted inspection access. She had written it in 3 violation notices, repeated it in 2 board meetings, and posted it online beneath a photograph of my house. Now 300 residents were watching. 3 local reporters stood near the food tent, invited by Lionel Brooks. Officer Ortiz was present for traffic control. Planning Director Evelyn Cho had stopped by to observe the event. Mike's safety cameras were recording every entrance. I pointed to a sign beside the gate. Ride operating area authorized staff and ticketed riders only. All entrants must follow operator instructions. Brenda, I said, you may attend as a guest. You may enter through check-in, sign the waiver, and follow event rules. You may not conduct an HOA inspection. I do not need your permission. You've been warned. She handed the megaphone to Diane. Then she ducked under the entrance rope. Mike stepped forward. Ma'am, you need a wristband. I am conducting an official inspection. You're currently conducting an unauthorized entrance. Do not touch me. Nobody's touching you. She marched past him toward the ride platform, clipboard held high like a shield against common sense. Officer Ortiz called out, Mrs. Carlisle, stop. She did not stop. Evelyn called, You have no inspection authority on this parcel. Brenda kept walking. The crowd became quiet. She climbed the 3 steps onto the loading platform. Swinging Sovereign was stationary, but 75 chairs swayed gently in the breeze. Brenda photographed the control panel. She photographed the green operating certificate. She photographed a trash can. Then she opened a small access gate marked Crew Only. Mike's voice changed. The friendliness disappeared, replaced by the tone of a man who had spent 30 years keeping people alive around moving machinery. Ma'am? Close that gate and step back. Brenda turned toward him. I am documenting unsecured mechanical equipment. That gate was secured before you opened it. I am authorized under Covenant 4.06. Covenant 4.06 can't stop a 68-foot machine. Several residents laughed. Brenda's face tightened like a purse clasp. I have the right to inspect every component affecting community safety. Mike pointed toward a yellow boundary line. You cross that line, we shut down and remove you. I am not one of your Carnival employees. No, Mike said. My employees follow instructions. That line earned him a round of applause. Brenda crossed the yellow line. Mike hit the emergency lockout. The ride's warning bell sounded. It was a deep metallic gong that rolled across the property like God clearing his throat before a zoning dispute. Brenda jumped. Her clipboard flew from her hands. Papers scattered across the platform. One sheet landed in an empty swing chair. Another stuck briefly to her visor. A third sailed over the railing and settled in Wesley Pike's funnel cake. Brenda lunged after the clipboard. Her shoe caught beneath a decorative chain barrier she had unclipped herself. She did not fall. She performed something more complicated. A 3-step sideways shuffle, a half-turn, and an involuntary seated landing into swing number 12. The safety restraint dropped against her lap. Not locked, just resting there. But Brenda reacted as though the ride had swallowed her whole. "Get me out!" Mike stared at her. "You sat in it. This restraint engaged. It's touching your knees. I did not consent to ride this machine. You climbed onto the platform, opened the crew gate, crossed the yellow line, and sat in the chair. I tripped over the chain you removed. Officer Ortiz climbed the steps." Brenda gripped the swing chains with both hands. "Officer, arrest him! He activated the ride while I was seated." The ride had not moved 6 inches. Ortiz looked at the locked control panel. He looked at Mike. "Is the ride powered? Emergency lockout engaged." He looked at Brenda. "Are you injured? I am trapped." Mike lifted the restraint with 2 fingers. "You're free." Brenda sprang from the seat like toast launched from a defective appliance. She pointed at me. "This was staged!" I stood outside the operational line. "You entered after being warned. You designed this entire event to humiliate the board." I designed a deck. The crowd erupted. For one beautiful second, even Officer Ortiz smiled. Brenda snatched her clipboard from the floor and began collecting papers. One of the reporters, Maya Trent from the Bellwether Ledger, picked up a page. "Mrs. Carlyle," she said, "is this a fine schedule?" Brenda froze. Maya read aloud. "Unauthorized public criticism of the board, $300. Interference with enforcement photography, $175. Failure to maintain respectful demeanor during inspection, $225. The crowd went silent again. I had never seen that document. Neither had most of the board. Diane Pritchard stepped closer. "Brenda, what is that?" "Draft enforcement guidance. You told us the new fine policy was still being reviewed." "It is being reviewed." "By whom?" Brenda straightened, breathing hard. "The president has emergency authority to prepare interim compliance measures." Lionel Brooks called from below. "Does that include charging people for facial expressions?" Brenda looked at the page in Maya's hand. "It has not been adopted." Another sheet drifted down from the ride platform. Wesley picked it up. "This one says, Priority Enforcement List." Brenda moved toward him. "Give me that." Wesley held it away. "My name's on here." "So is mine," Lionel said. Residents crowded closer. The list contained 23 names. Beside each was a handwritten note. Mercer, hostile, document heavy. Brooks, disruptive at meetings. Kaplan, rabbit incident. Pike, questions budget. Nguyen, refuses decorative mulch. Patel, possible campaign opponent. At the bottom, underlined twice, Brenda had written, "Increase pressure before June election." Diane stared at her. "You've been using fines to target election opponents?" "No. That is an internal planning document. You wrote, increase pressure." "That refers to compliance education." Wesley held up another page. "This says, foreclosure threat usually works." A murmur moved through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Brenda's confidence finally cracked. She reached for the papers. Diane stepped between her and Wesley. "Don't." Brenda's head snapped around. "You are vice president. I am directing you to secure confidential board materials." I'm vice president of an HOA, Brenda. I'm not recovering state secrets from a carnival ride. Officer Ortiz collected the pages. Brenda pointed at him. Those documents belong to the association. They're evidence now. Evidence of what? Evelyn Cho answered. Potential selective enforcement, breach of fiduciary duty, improper fines, and possibly fraudulent lien practices. Brenda's face went pale beneath her foundation. That is an outrageous accusation. No, Evelyn said. It's an extremely specific concern. Maya Trent held up her phone. Mrs. Carlyle, did you create a list of residents to pressure before the election? I will not answer questions during an active inspection. You're not conducting an inspection, Ortiz said. Brenda turned toward the crowd. These documents are being deliberately misrepresented by people who have always opposed responsible governance. Lionel folded his arms. I opposed the inflatable rabbit fine. The rabbit exceeded 6 feet. It was Easter. It was visible from the road. It was a rabbit, Brenda, not a missile. Brenda's voice climbed higher, like a tea kettle attempting opera. This community will descend into chaos without enforcement. Today it's carnival rides. Tomorrow it's livestock, neon roofs, and above-ground pools. A little girl near the front raised her hand. Can we have goats? Her mother lowered the hand. Not now, sweetie. Brenda stepped backward while gesturing with the clipboard. Her heel caught the same chain she had unclipped. This time she fell into swing number 13. The chair rotated slowly on its hanging joint, turning her away from the crowd. For 3 full seconds, Brenda faced the opposite direction, while continuing her speech. And I will not permit this association to be dismantled by mob behavior. The swing rotated back. Her visor had slipped over one eye. Mike whispered to me, that chair's never going to recover. Officer Ortiz helped her stand. Mrs. Carlyle, you need to leave the operational platform. I am not finished. You are finished here. I demand that you arrest Daniel Mercer for harassment, endangerment, and unauthorized operation of commercial machinery. Ortiz looked at me. Did you invite her onto the platform? No. Did you activate the ride? No. Did you place her in the chair? No. Brenda slapped the clipboard against her thigh. He designed the circumstances. Ortiz nodded slowly. You ignored 3 warnings, opened a secured gate, crossed a safety line, tripped over your own barrier, and sat down twice. I did not sit down voluntarily. The second time was remarkably similar to the first. The crowd laughed again. Ortiz pointed toward the exit. You can leave on your own, or I can issue a trespass citation. Brenda stared at him. Then she stared at the residents. Then she looked at the scattered pages exposing the private enforcement campaign she had carried onto the platform herself. The horror arrived quietly. Not because of the ride, not because of me, because she finally understood that her own clipboard had done what no lawyer, engineer, police officer, or city official could have done. It had told the truth in public. Diane removed her HOA badge. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. You don't have authority. I have 2 other directors on the phone right now. You cannot act without the president. Diane glanced toward Harold Boone, who had arrived 30 minutes earlier, and was eating a funnel cake near the ring toss. Harold! Harold looked up. Did somebody say my name? Do you support an emergency meeting to suspend Brenda pending investigation? Harold took a bite. Sure. Brenda stared at him. You cannot vote while consuming carnival food. Harold chewed thoughtfully. Show me the bylaw. That afternoon, 297 residents attended Community Appreciation Day. Swinging Sovereign completed 32 ride cycles. Rosa sold 614 funnel cakes. Randy's toilets performed without incident. Brenda left in her golf cart at 2:08 p.m., without the clipboard, without her HOA badge, and without Diane. The amber light was not flashing. At 4:30, I finally rode Swinging Sovereign. Mike strapped me into chair number 12. You nervous? He asked. I inspect bridges for a living. That wasn't my question. Yes. He lowered the restraint. The ride began slowly. The chairs lifted. My house shrank beneath me. The wetlands spread out in green and silver beyond the rooftops. At 68 feet, I could see the entire neighborhood. The clubhouse, the purple sunroom, the collapsed Easter rabbit, and Brenda's golf cart parked crookedly in her driveway. For one revolution, I imagined my father sitting beside me. He would have hated the height. He would have loved the engineering. The association's investigation lasted 26 days. A forensic accountant found that Brenda had issued $48,375 in fines over 3 years, 71% of them against residents who had opposed her policies or supported other board candidates. She had used HOA funds to pay $9,800 to a compliance consultant operated by her cousin, Milton Carlisle, whose qualifications consisted of owning a printer and disliking hedges. She had also approved her own sunroom without a vote, waived $3,200 in fines for Diane without telling Diane, and charged the association $1,140 for 7 color-coded clipboards. The insurance company denied coverage for any legal claims arising from intentional selective enforcement. Brenda resigned on June 2nd at 7:46 p.m. Her resignation letter was 14 pages long. The first sentence blamed organized anti-governance factions. The final sentence described her years of service as an era of unmatched aesthetic stability. Residents voted to refund $31,600 in improper fines. The board canceled every pending lien. The Architectural Harmony Committee was reduced from 3 members to 5, because Lionel Brooks insisted that no committee should be small enough to fit inside one golf cart. Diane Pritchard became interim president. Her inaugural speech lasted 11 seconds. Keep your yard reasonable. Don't block the fire lane. And please stop reporting each other's wind chimes. She received a standing ovation. 3 weeks later, my deck application was approved unanimously. Big Mike helped me build it. Not because he was a carpenter, he explained, but because after installing a 68-foot ride, he needed to know whether the smaller structure had a decent personality. The deck cost $14,920. The Carnival had cost $23,810 after food, transportation, permits, insurance, and Randy. It was financially irrational. It was also the best money I had ever spent. We positioned my father's rocking chair in the southwest corner beneath the pergola. Lionel donated a small brass plaque. It read, "Elevated Leisure Platform Maximum Occupancy. 18 Excessive Outdoor Congregation." Encouraged Brenda sold her house in August for $42,000, below the original asking price. She moved to a condominium in fictional North Bellwether, where exterior modifications were prohibited. Balconies were identical, and the landscaping company owned all the clipboards. Swinging Sovereign returned to Mike's equipment yard. He renamed chair number 13 the Carlisle. He also added a small warning label to the platform gate. Do not cross unless you are prepared to participate. These days I sit on the deck most evenings with a cup of coffee I fully intend to drink while it's hot. The frogs start calling across the wetlands. Gary the heron resumes judging me. Neighbors stop by without filing forms. Sometimes Wesley Pike joins me, although he refuses to sit in any chair that swings. And whenever someone asks why I spent nearly $24,000 on a Carnival ride just to get approval for a $14,000 deck, I tell them the truth. The deck gave me somewhere to sit. The Carnival gave Brenda somewhere to fall. So what would you have built after they denied your deck permit? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this suburban ride made you laugh, like the video. And subscribe to Sovereign Judgment. Because revenge may be best served cold, but mine came with a height requirement.